to the Middle East. Palestinians in the city of Rafah are waiting in fear of Israeli ground offensive because we've heard from Israel that their strategy is to go to that southernmost point after some of the worst airstrikes since the beginning of Israel's bombardment of the besieged Strip.
Now, more than a half of Gaza's population of 2.3 million is now crammed into the city on the border with Egypt, which was home to only 250,000 before the war between Israel and Hamas erupted after October the 7th.
Former NATO commander Rear Admiral Chris Parry joins us now. Chris, thank you so much. We've been hearing about Netanyahu's aims and ideas for that area. We've also heard a quite loud voice of condemnation from the international community, particularly the EU, the US, the UK. It seems as though Netanyahu is planning on not listening to that and pursuing the invasion.
Well, good morning, Rosie, and congratulations, Jeremy.
Thank you, my friend. Yes, I look better than you, though. You haven't. You've had no sleep at all. I managed to stay in a hotel last night. Wink, wink. You know what we're saying?
I wouldn't get away with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So, Rosie, I think the Israelis have been pretty clear from the word go what their strategy is. They're going to clear the Gaza Strip of Hamas. They're going to destroy the tunnels. And they're going to release their hostages. And so far, nobody else has come up with a plan for allowing them to do that. So they're just going to continue. What they're trying to do, as I understand, is get people out of Rafah and the south back into those areas that they've already cleared. But I don't think we should doubt the determination of the Israelis to complete this task, as I said, in the absence of any other plan.
So I'm sorry, I should have said offensive rather than invasion. Look, for Chris, this is a real heartbreaking situation for the people who were told Rafah was a safe place to go. We now have, it's just under 1.5 million people who've moved there, who now are told, well, where is a safe place? And maybe there actually isn't anywhere safe in Gaza.
Yeah, I had a look at this, Rosie, and there are safe routes. Obviously, the top 2/3 of Gaza has been pretty much devastated. The tunnels have been destroyed, and of course, that's taken out quite a bit of the surface infrastructure and habitation as well. But as I understand it, there are so-called safe routes. There are sort of tented and other temporary accommodation, and it's a question of people moving back into those areas that have already been cleared. I'm not a spokesman for the Israeli government, of course, but that's what I understand is happening on the ground. The Israelis simply cannot clear the area without sort of incurring huge casualties amongst the local population and themselves if people remain in Rafah.
Speaking to Lord Dannett yesterday, Chris, and you know, there's two ways of looking at this. There's the humanitarian issue of 1.5 million people. We heard yesterday there are 4, they reckon, the Israelis, 4 battalions of Hamas still left there. The two arguments are, well, obviously they're hiding themselves amongst the people, and if you try and get them out, you're going to cause casualties. And we talk about, you know, the problems with war. War is revolting and war is worrying. But my question is this: Netanyahu seems to be on a journey now where he's not even listening to America. This seems to be, you know, not a two-state solution anymore. This is Benjamin Netanyahu, who is probably toast without this war, if we're being absolutely honest, who doesn't really seem to have a care in the world. He's going to do what he says he's going to do and see it through. And this, by the way, is nothing to do with how I believe it's absolutely right after what happened in October that Israel has a right to do what it's doing. But he is losing popularity and he is losing support across the world, isn't he, Chris? Undoubtedly.
Jeremy, I think one has to put oneself in the position of the head of the government in Israel. He said what he's going to do. He's going to clear Hamas out of Gaza. And frankly, after the mistakes of the 7th of October, from the strategic down to the tactical level, the only way he can redeem his reputation is actually extirpating Hamas and making sure no attack can come from that region again. That's the best he can do in political and personal terms. If he wants a legacy, he has to have a successful war that actually ends the threat that comes from Gaza. That's how I think
but
he
Chris,
believes he can actually walk out of it.
My argument is, and I agree with you, my friend, but the argument is you can clear those battalions, you can exorcise, as you said, Hamas on the ground. Ideologically, right? that's not going to go. In fact, if you create what he is creating, isn't the ideology, in fact, going to grow even more fervent in that area? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I've heard this before, Jeremy, and you and I both have. How did we get rid of the Nazis in Germany is what I always say to people. We had to actually go on the ground. We had to get rid of their geographic base. And once you extirpate that, then the rest of it can wither on the vine. I think Hamas is a specific ideology within the overall Palestinian cause. And I'm afraid to say also, if you make an example of Hamas, other groups are going to say, crikey, we don't want that happening to us. So we'll negotiate.
Interesting.
Chris, this is the challenge, isn't it? Because you've got the actual physical fighting happening on the ground. Then you have the sort of PR war. And Hamas have played this so strategically to say, we're going to have our base and our operations into places where it is going to be, it's going to look to the world absolutely abhorrent for Israel to attack there, whether that's putting their bases underneath hospitals or, you know, within civilian populations. How does Israel counteract that? Because it seems like Netanyahu says, I'm going to go with this military aggression, but he may lose the support of his key allies in pursuing that. It takes a sort of new, sort of sophisticated PR strategy from Israel, doesn't it? And do we know what that actually is?
The thing is, Rosie, one of the things I always used to say when I was in the service, you have to win both the real battle and the virtual battle, and the two need to be entwined. And I'm afraid to say that the Hamas operations are a bit slicker, they're a bit more nimble than the Israelis are. We've seen lots of fake videos, we've seen lots of fake incidents put up, and you know, I always refer to the Goebbels approach. Goebbels said, you know, you've got to appeal to the emotional layers in society, not to the intellectual layers. And that's what Hamas are doing all the time. And I'm afraid to say, with all the incidents that we see here, we're unable to differentiate what has really happened from what Hamas wants to see has happened. I mean, the classic was the Al-Shifa hospital, where, of course, first news out there was the Israelis had hit it. In fact, it was a Hamas rocket that had fallen short. There are numerous incidents like that where the Israelis are just not nimble enough to be able to deal with that. And I'm afraid it's always going to be the case when you've got, you know, a loose organization like Hamas can do what it likes. There's no accountability, whereas governments, of course, have accountability. I mean, the Israelis are being caught for suckers on some things. There are some setups. You've seen the so-called Pallywood videos, you know, people with bandages over the tops of hijab and things like that. I mean, it's pretty basic, but I think it was Jonathan Swift said, a lie gets around the world before the truth can get its trousers on.
That's excellent. Can I just finally, you know, we talked, and Rosie's so right, you know, we talked about how the global world, in effect, you know, you look at Biden, what he said, Lord David Cameron this week. Do they not understand? I mean, of course, humanitarian-wise, nobody wants what's happening. But is there a military strategy, in your experience, that can rid the world of, let's just label it, the terrorist organisation that is Hamas, so that whether it's PR or not, they are no longer viable? Is it possible to do that without sustaining tens of thousands more casualties, i.e. innocent victims? Or is it just a fact of war?
I'm afraid all of that, Jeremy. You know, if you're fighting in built-up areas and you've got people around you, you've got two options. You either blockade, and the Israelis tried that, or, of course, you go in there and you sort out the bad guys from the less bad guys and the innocent population. The problem is Hamas has spent 20 years perfecting the strategy of hiding within the population. If you look at the video that came out yesterday of Yahya Sinwar going through the tunnels, he's accompanied by children. They're not his children. The children are there for his protection in case he actually gets caught by an Israeli snatch squad. And of course, the children are there as basically things to screen him. I mean, how immoral is that? I have to tell you. I mean, there's nothing in my experience, I'm afraid, tells me that Hamas is anything like the good guys.
Quite right too, Chris Parry. Thank you so much indeed. Former NATO commander, Rear Admiral Chris Parry.